We hear a lot about AI at the moment, don't we? How it's going to replace our jobs, the threat it poses to humanity, how it's developing at a rate that's alarming even those developing it. But are the risks really that great? And do they outweigh all the benefits? I mean, it's brought the Beatles back with a brand new song.
It's a new Beatles single, written by John Lennon, played by John, Paul, George and Ringo.
How great is that? A new Beatles release half a century after they broke up. All thanks to the magic of AI. But this week, world leaders and tech experts have been trying to address all the worrying aspects of AI at the world's first safety summit at Bletchley Park, home to World War II's codebreakers who cracked the Nazis' Enigma machine. So, how's it gone? Let's find out. I'm Sally Lockwood, and this is the Sky News Daily. First, we're going to speak to Stuart Russell, an AI guru, or officially, Professor of Computer Science at the University of California, Berkeley, and a member of the World Economic Forum's Global AI Council.
So AI, artificial intelligence, is, I think most people understand, it's about making machines intelligent. And the question is, what does that mean? For most of the history of the field, it's meant something pretty simple, that the machine's actions can be expected to achieve its objectives. So if you think about using your GPS and the objective is the destination that you want to get to, the algorithm figures out how to get there and then chooses where to turn left and turn right and all that stuff. People have argued forever about whether it's actually thinking, whether it's really having subjective experience, whether it's conscious. But from a practical point of view, we only really care about what it does and what it's going to do. And for that, we don't have to answer the question of whether it's actually conscious.
And just how big a moment are we in when it comes to AI revolutionizing how we live?
So I think if you'd asked me that question a year ago, I would have pointed to some important progress that had been made in recognizing objects in images and transcribing speech and other useful tasks that machines can do. And we would just have seen some of the first generative AI systems that could produce images. So you would type in a description, I want a picture of members of the House of Lords mud wrestling, and then it would produce a picture, do its best to come up with an image that corresponds to that description. Didn't work all that well, but it's getting better. And then ChatGPT happened in November of last year, and that completely changed the discourse. Very soon, politicians and CEOs, as well as normal people, started using ChatGPT and were really taken aback by how intelligent it seemed, how it was able to write a whole editorial article about the problem of peace in Ukraine or whatever it might be. And I no longer needed to explain to politicians why AI might represent a long-term risk to humanity as AI systems become more intelligent than human beings, because they could feel it. It was sort of a foretaste of a future where there's unlimited intelligence on tap. And we're not there yet, but that foretaste was enough to galvanize the world. In my view, and I think most of my colleagues would say, it does not yet reach the level that we would call what some people call AGI, artificial general intelligence, meaning AI systems that are as capable or more capable than humans along every relevant dimension. And a group at Microsoft, very distinguished AI researchers, studied it for several months. A week after the release, they published a paper saying that it exhibited sparks of artificial general intelligence. And I think that, followed by the letter suggesting that we should actually slow down and figure out how to design these things properly, how to regulate them, really got the attention of governments.
Now, a lot of the debate around ChatGPT and AI is about the existential risk it poses. How valid is that, or is that slightly exaggerated?
Ascribing existential risk to GPT-4, I think very few people are actually doing that. They're pointing to a number of other risks that it poses. For example, the ability to generate very convincing disinformation, the ability to give step-by-step hand-holding advice to a terrorist on exactly how to build a biological weapon, for example. If there were to be a major catastrophe in the next 12 to 18 months as a result of AI, it would probably be one or both of those things. The systems that we have now exhibit significant weaknesses. Probably the biggest weakness is the inability to construct and execute long-term plans. So that will be the kind of thing which would enable a system to present a real risk to humanity. So let me give you an analogy, right? If you think about playing chess against a computer, anyone who plays chess knows that computers are far, far better than human beings because they can just look much further ahead into the future of the game. They're often thinking 35 or 40 moves ahead, which is more than even the best human players can do. And that means that if you try to win, you will fail. They will win, and that's the end of it. So if you take that idea and extend it into the real world, where the AI system can do that kind of look ahead, to construct those plans that are just thinking much further ahead than humans, and if they're pursuing an objective that's in conflict with what humans want the future to be like, then who's going to win? The AI system, assuming that it's sufficiently capable. So it seems inevitable that if we don't figure out how to make these powerful systems that will be developed, and many people think they'll be developed in the next 5 years, if we don't figure out how to make those systems guaranteed safe, so we can be absolutely sure that what they do will not be in conflict with what humans want. So that's the problem we face. How can we ensure human control forever over machines that will become more powerful than human beings?
Just in terms of AI developing in tandem with the right safeguards being put in place, are we there or is it too late for that?
I think it's definitely not too late. It's certainly true that progress is very rapid, and the investments going specifically into building artificial general intelligence are actually far greater than, for example, the entire science budget of the United States. Governments need to think about something beyond voluntary self-regulation. There's a lot of history showing that you need an external constraint on what corporations are doing because they're quite legitimately pursuing their interests, but those interests may not be aligned with the interests of the human race. And so governments are authorized and should intervene where it's appropriate. And the kinds of regulations I think that we need right now, one approach that seems to be gaining favor is that just as we do with medicines and we do, in fact, with nuclear power stations, the developer has to present to the regulator essentially a proof that the system, the nuclear power station, the medicine, or in this case, the AI system, meets the required safety properties. We are not anywhere close to being able to do that with AI systems. So if I just asked, the biggest companies in the world, can you guarantee that your AI system is not going to replicate itself onto other computers without permission? Can you guarantee that it's not going to break into someone else's computer system and steal information? Can you guarantee that it's not going to advise terrorists on how to build biological weapons? At the moment, they would probably say no. And the answer that the regulator should give, that governments should give, is, well, tough. Come back when you can, and then we'll talk about allowing your systems to be deployed. We shouldn't take this excuse that, oh, it's really difficult. A normal person would say, well, that's pathetic. You've got hundreds of billions of pounds and you can't even guarantee something as simple as that. So go back to the lab and get on with it and figure it out how to do it.
And just lastly, Stuart, do you feel confident after this week at the direction that AI is now moving in?
I am more optimistic as a result of the summit. I think that the direction of the technology is still going in the wrong direction. We are still very much thinking about building bigger and bigger black boxes that we don't understand, training them on more and more data, and sort of hoping for the best. And in fact, the way we're training these systems, mostly on data generated by humans in the form of text. So reading newspapers, scientific journal articles, encyclopedias, eventually, pretty much anything the human race has ever written is going to be ingested. And so what we're actually training them to do is to imitate human linguistic behavior. And human linguistic behavior is generated by humans. And the humans had purposes in generating that behavior. For example, I want you to buy this car. I want you to vote for me. I want to be rich. I want you to fall in love with me and marry me. So what we're actually training these systems to do is, first of all, to have a multiple personality disorder, because essentially the system is learning various different types of human language, behavior, and types of goal and types of personality. And you can evoke different personalities by talking to the system in different ways. For example, I often, if my students can't get the system to produce a useful answer to the question, I say, well, did you say please? And you might think, what has that got to do with it? And in fact, if you say please, if you couch your question politely, you're evoking the personality that's sort of like the helpful librarian, as opposed to the personality that's like, the abrasive politician or the drunk in the pub or whatever it might be. And it seems to work. Unfortunately, we actually don't want machines to have human goals, right? And I usually use this example of drinking coffee. If I'm drinking coffee and the machine is observing me drinking coffee, I don't want it to want to drink coffee. I want it to know that I like coffee and to make me a cup of coffee, but I don't want it to drink coffee. So training something to copy and adopt human goals is a fundamental mistake. But that's what we're doing with this technology. Once we demand that the developers prove that their systems are safe, they're going to have to go back to the drawing board to some extent and rethink the technological approach that they're taking.
That has been an absolutely fascinating insight, Stuart. I really appreciate your time. Thanks so much for joining us today.
A pleasure.
After the break, I'll be chatting to our technology correspondent, Arthi Nachiappan, who's been taking the temperature at Bletchley Park all week. Our technology correspondent, Arthi Nachiappan, joins us now from the hustle and bustle of the Global Summit at Bletchley Park. Hi, Arthi. Now, we hear a lot about how the UK wants to become a world leader in AI, hosting this summit, a big part of that. Is it living up to this reputation?
They've been making a big deal in government about the fact that this is the first ever AI safety summit, and it's an attempt to take hold of the narrative and say that this is something that we're going to be the world leaders on this, and we're going to bring together not only other world leaders, but important people in industry like Sam Altman, who's the boss of the company behind ChatGPT. It's as much of a PR exercise as much as it is trying to lay the foundations for future regulations or future consensus on AI safety. Rishi Sunak, as someone who loves technology, it's going to be something that he sees as quite important to his legacy to have hosted this.
Yeah, I mean, we hear a lot about how the UK wants to become a world leader in AI, and this global summit hosting it is very much a part of that.
There are a lot of AI startups that are hugely influential in the UK. So it's not necessarily always a case of size, but I do think that we're maybe not as influential in terms of pushing, say, frontier models forward as businesses in other countries are. This is maybe an attempt to take hold of the regulation aspect of that and to really be the ones pushing that forward. We are a little bit behind the EU in terms of their regulation. They've already got an act that's looking to come into force by the end of the year. We do have a white paper on AI, which has given a rough idea what the government's stance is.
And what particular concerns are you hearing that people have raised with you?
One is about who is represented at the summit. If you speak to the government, they will definitely say we've got a big range of representation from civil society, from different parts of the world, and from different sizes of companies. But it's a very exclusive, invite-only event. Only some 100 or so delegates, and it's been really hard, honestly, for media to even get to people because of the way that it's run. We have to be escorted from the media centre even to come and record something. So we can't walk around and meet people. We can't gauge the mood of the people that are here in the way that we'd want to. That kind of transparency is lacking a little bit. And I would say that what we're hearing from people is that there could have been a bit more representation of people from the global south, people who maybe are affected by AI bias but are not getting as much say as some of the big tech companies in how to shape our priorities when it comes to AI, and also more representation from civil society, people who want to talk about AI ethics and what is happening in terms of this AI supply chain, how AI is actually developed and how that can be done better, and about transparency and how that works.
So you mentioned AI bias. What is that?
AI is trained on information that we already have in society. And so if it reflects society, it will also reflect some of the biases that exist in society, whether that is based on gender, on race, or various other characteristics. If we consider some US government research that was published in 2019, and it specifically looked at facial recognition technology, which is powered by AI, it found that Black people were between 10 and 100 times more likely to be misidentified by facial recognition technology than white people. And this is a problem because it means that, for example, if it's used by the police, they're much more likely to say that someone looks like someone else if they're from a non-white ethnicity, and they'll be overrepresented among suspects. This is something that is affecting people now. There have been a number of known wrongful arrests in the US, at least, because of the use of this facial recognition technology. And the concern among some is that we focus too much on, say, the existential risks, biosecurity in 2025 or further in the future, when we have these pressing issues at the moment.
Elon Musk and Rishi Sunak meeting at Downing Street this afternoon at the time of recording. The meeting will have already happened by the time this goes to air. Is it just a photo op, or could it result in some sort of meaningful relationship when it comes to AI?
It's clearly mutually beneficial, this partnership for both of them. Rishi Sunak wants as many eyes on this summit as possible, and he wants it to look like a success. And the fact that he's managed to get one of the big names in tech, and also someone who's kind of notorious for being online and being known for what he's said, it's a good look for him to have Elon Musk on side. If we look at from Musk's side, he seeks the credibility that being alongside world leaders and being taken seriously gets him. But he's not an AI expert. It's not exactly his background. Yes, X, formerly known as Twitter, uses AI in a lot of its processes, but that doesn't necessarily mean that he's the person we should be looking to for how we should go forward with AI regulation to better protect people. Some people will be worried about if it muddies the conversation a little bit rather than adds meaningfully to how we're going to move forward with AI.
As this first global AI summit closes at Bletchley Park this week, what's the feeling there? Are people encouraged at what's been discussed this week, that AI can be regulated?
I think there is a sense that people are encouraged by what's been discussed, but I wouldn't necessarily say that the focus has been that much on regulation and exactly how it should be done. I think if it were, you'd see a lot more disagreement. So far, it's been more towards getting a consensus on a voluntary agreement about what we should be doing to ensure AI is safer. But what has come out of that has often been more focused on research and keeping on top of the latest tools and evaluating them for safety. There hasn't really been that much information on what enforceable regulation is going to look like as a result of this. And I think that that is part of the problem, because if you focus purely on the voluntary agreements, you kind of risk allowing big tech companies to mark their own homework, because they've already developed these models. They've done so without a great deal of transparency. We still don't know what information ChatGPT has been trained on exactly. And now they're kind of in dialogue with politicians to say, okay, we should be more careful, we should be regulating AI, we should be protecting people, which of course looks great for them, but we still don't know how they got to where they are.
Okay, Arthi, it's been great to get your thoughts. Thanks so much for joining us. We've talked about AI a lot in past podcasts if you want to scroll back through our episodes, and there's little doubt we'll be talking more about this in the future. Thanks for your company. We're back again tomorrow.